Welcome to this edition of Mississippi Happenings podcast. I'm David O's, your host, and Jim Newman was unable to join us today, but we do miss him, and hopefully he'll be with us next time. We've always heard the old saying, never discuss religion and politics and sex. Well, it just leads to trouble. I firmly disagree with that statement, at least the religion and the politics part. I believe that the lack of discussion of religion and politics has led us into a divided nation that we have become. This is our first installment of Religion and Politics in America Today. I want to introduce you to Hugh Hollowell. Hugh is a sixth generation Mississippian, and he is a pastor of Open Door Mennonite Church in Jackson, Mississippi, which is a multiracial peace church formed in the aftermath of the civil rights movement. He is a writer, a storyteller, and has published in a newsletter called Life is So Beautiful for more than a decade. Before becoming a pastor at Open Door, he spent 12 years working as a pastor among unhoused people and those struggling with addictions. This has taught him much about what he knows about both second chances and grace. He and his spouse Renee live in the Fondren area of Jackson, where they have a small-scale kitten rescue and live with 4 permanent cats and 5 chickens. Hugh, it is great to have you with us.
So glad to be here.
Now, before we get into the subject, tell us a little bit about you and your ministry.
Yeah, sure thing. So I'm the pastor at Open Door Mennonite. Open Door was founded around 1970. There were white Mennonites who had come to Jackson to be part of the civil rights movement. And they developed lots of relationships with people of other races, both Choctaw and Black. And in the late 60s, early 70s in Jackson, it was not a given that multiracial congregations could happen. In fact, there were a lot of people against that happening. And so Open Door was founded so that those people who had built those relationships could worship together. I've been the pastor there for the last 3 years. And we're still to this day multiracial. We have Black, white, and Choctaw members. And over the pandemic, 2020, 2021, we made the decision to be a congregation that was fully affirming of LGBTQIA people, because we don't really think you can call your church Open Door and yet place restrictions on who can come in. Like you said in my introduction, I'm a 6th generation Mississippian. My people have been here for 200 years. And my mama and my brothers still live up in Marshall County, and they complain that I don't get home nearly enough.
As they should.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about some of the beliefs of the Mennonite church.
Sure. The Mennonites were formed during the Protestant Reformation of the 1500s. The thing that Martin Luther was reforming against was basically financial corruption within the church. And the Mennonites were formed because of our concerns about the interplay of church and state. At the time, it was so corrupt that the local governor would actually appoint bishops in the church. So you didn't even have to be Christian to be a bishop in the church at the time. You just had to have the ear of the governor. And so that was a problem. The people who would become Mennonites thought it was a problem. And so, and at the time, the way you became a citizen of your country was to get baptized as an infant. And so there was no what we would now call believers' baptism. Our Baptist siblings, for example, are probably the most common, most well-known believers' baptism church. But at the time, there was none of that. Everyone was baptized as an infant. And it was a political decision, not a religious one. And so the people, Menno Simons was the priest who kind of led this Reformation. And he said baptism should be a conscious decision one makes out of conscience, not out of your mama wants you to be a good Italian. And so a group of believers got together. They rebaptized each other as adults and believers. And these people were called Mennonites because Menno Simons was the leader of that group. So we're really big on separation of church and state. We believe in centering the teachings of Jesus, not just teachings about Jesus. So, for example, when Jesus said, love your enemies, he probably meant, at the very minimum, not to kill them. And so, as a result of that, we're practitioners of nonviolence. Historically, Mennonites have not gone to war, both because of the nonviolent stance, but also because it's participating in the state, right? So kind of a double header there. But other than our commitment to nonviolence and our pretty severe strict belief in separation of church and state, we're a lot like most other low church Protestants. If you came to our church, we would sing some songs and we would have some prayers, and I would preach for a little bit. And, on some Sundays we have communion or the Lord's Supper, just like everyone else does.
Gotcha. It's interesting.
And if we had potluck, you would be very fortunate, because Mennonites love to cook for people and provide hospitality. You just have no idea.
As a United Methodist, we know about those casseroles. We know about potlucks, and
right.
We love it. We love it. I'm glad that you brought up the separation of church and state. I want to share with you a quote from James Madison, and he wrote, "The purpose of separation of church and state is to keep forever from these shores the ceaseless strife that has soaked the soil of Europe in blood for centuries." And we know that in today's toxic environment, it appears that religion has taken a front seat and taken control of politics. There are those who see Donald Trump as the answer to the evangelicals' prayers, and those that see Donald Trump as, as something else.
The Antichrist?
As not a man of God. And I'm not judging, the Bible tells
Sure.
us do not judge, and no man knows the heart of another. But, it appears, and I want your take on this. As I say, this is the first segment that we're doing on religion and politics. What do you think is happening in today's world when it comes to Christian nationalism? And what do you think about, what's happening today with the separation of church and state?
Yeah. So I think it's really obvious that what we are seeing here is not people with strongly held religious beliefs. What we're seeing here is people who desire access to power. And they're utilizing, just like bad actors have used for thousands of years, they're utilizing religious language and religious tools to gain proximity to power. You see this, for instance, when J.D. Vance, before he was a potential vice presidential candidate, had all sort of things to say, who is a Catholic, a baptized Catholic, and is very open about being a baptized Catholic. Allegedly, his faith is very important to him. Before he was tapped to be vice president, he had multiple bad things to say about the character of Donald Trump. But after he has proximity to power and is tapped to be vice president, suddenly Trump is like God's messenger on earth. And so you see this play out time and time again. You can't even really debate them. By them, I mean the current administration. You can't even, and supporters of it, you can't even really debate them on the religious points because they're not making religious arguments. They're really focusing on power and proximity to power. When everyone is concerned about the unborn child, but the Bible spends virtually no amount of time talking about that, but spends hundreds and hundreds of verses talking about how we should react to the people who are aliens in our land, and people who are hungry, and people who are vulnerable, and people who are sick. And so they spend an awful amount of time making very much out of what God made very little of, and minimize or make very little out of what God talked about a whole lot. So yeah, I really do think it's a power grab.
That's an interesting thought. And you're right about, Vance and the late Lindsey Graham and other
Right.
politicians, Marco Rubio.
Mm-hmm.
The worst candidate, and he was this horrible man. Yet, I've used the term, they kissed his ring. And I think you're absolutely right, and I'm glad you brought that up. It appears that it is, access to power. Um, so that's but in my opinion, and this is my opinion, that when you talk about the separation of church and state, it appears to me that the separation of church and state is for the protection of the church, not so much for the state. But I guess once again, it goes back to what you brought up, that it is, about power. So that's a good point.
The question is always, whose church, right?
Mhm.
So from the very beginning, we were a multicultural country. There have been Muslims in the United States as long as there's been a United States. The Africans who were brought here against their will and enslaved brought religions with them as well. There's always been Jewish people in the United States. And so when we're talking about separation of church and state, uh, we have to ask, whose church? If the people who want prayers in school, do they want Muslim prayer in school? Can we have a call to prayer every day, 5 times a day, over the loudspeakers at school? Is that what they mean? That's not what they mean. What they mean is Christian prayers in school. And so, even if you remove the religious argument from it, I have strongly held religious beliefs, but one of those religious beliefs is respecting the dignity of all people. And so forcing Muslims to sit through Christian prayers doesn't make sense to me. Forcing Jewish people to sit through Muslim prayers doesn't make sense to me. Church and state, whose church? So we have to have a wall of separation between church and state. Otherwise, whoever decides which church is in power has the power. I mean, we saw Donald Trump basically try to lecture the Pope on issues of morality, which, I mean, Donald Trump is now an adjudicated rapist according to the court, but he's going to lecture the successor of St. Peter on issues of morality.
And I think that J.D.
Yeah.
Vance also tried to do that as well with the Pope. And
Right.
it did turn out well for either one of them. But go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's fine. I mean, it absolutely blows my mind. But I mean, there's a religious argument to be made as well. So look, I believe that I'm speaking as a pastor here, right?
Okay.
Ex cathedra, I guess.
There you are.
I believe that God made the land that we call the Mississippi Delta. I believe that God made the Mississippi River. I believe that God made the Gulf of Mexico. But God did not make Mississippi, and God did not make America. Humans did that. We made America. We made Mississippi. We're the ones who drew those lines and said that the land inside these lines is different than the land outside these lines. So America is a human project. Mississippi is a human project. And we've always started these new countries and new states for good reasons, right? Like liberty and escaping tyranny and religious freedom. And we have again and again and again tried to create heaven on earth. And we can't just seem to admit that we've messed it up, that we haven't. And so we insist that what we've created is holy, sacred, special. And so we can't elect a politician that doesn't end a speech with God bless America. We start every city council meeting with public prayers to God, asking God to bless our undertakings. Watching our current Secretary of Defense with the social media accounts coming out of the Secretary of Defense with all of the religious language on it. It's idolatry. It's idolatry. It's asking us to substitute the reverence that we should devote, that should be God's alone, and instead transfer that toward a country. And that's wrong. I love America. I'm thankful that my family has been in America for almost 300 years. I've had opportunities here I wouldn't have had elsewhere. But that has nothing to do with being Christian. If anything, there are times that being a good American and being a good Christian will put you at odds with each other. And you have to decide which one you're going to choose when that happens.
It's amazing.
Kind of went on a tear.
No. That's fine. That's what, that's what we wanted to, that's, you're speaking from your heart, you're speaking, and that's what we want to do. And so it's all good. Now I forgot what I was going to say, but that's all right. um, let me just play devil's advocate. You know, you
Okay.
brought up a good point, idolatry. Tell me, and what is wrong with the our elected officials? Tell me what's wrong with, or what's your thoughts again on an elected official opening up a meeting, with a word of prayer.
Who are we praying to?
Ah,
Because
okay. Go ahead.
okay, are we praying to the Great Spirit that the Choctaw recognize? Are we praying to Allah as recognized by Muslims? Are are we praying to Yahweh? Uh,
Got it.
are we praying to Jesus? And if we're praying, I call it a to whom it may concern prayer, where we just, you know, uh, you see this all the time in public spaces, right? Like
Yeah.
uh, a prayer to a generic God, um, and we ask, for the most banal, non-consequential things, and then we end with Amen, so that no one gets offended. Like, why do we have to go through that pageantry if this isn't a sincerely held religious belief? Instead, we're just performing this action. Um, so yeah, uh, so that would be my first question: is what God are we praying to? The second question is, Abraham Lincoln said one time that he was not worried about God being on his side nearly as much as he was worried about being on God's side. Um, and
I
and
love quotes.
so
That's a good.
it it is a good one. So uh, if we go to war, okay, let's not even invoke war. SEC football. It's Friday night. We're at the stadium. You have team. I'm not going to name teams because I'll offend somebody. You have the first team, and they're in the locker rooms, and they're praying, God, like, uh, help us win tonight. And in the other locker room, they're also praying, God, help us win tonight. One of them is going to lose. Does that mean God chose sides? Is God an Alabama fan? I mean, don't ask Alabama, but I mean, the um, the it's just ludicrous. We go to war, and we fully believe that God is on our side, and so we pray that God will help us kill young people from the other country who are also probably Christians. At least some of them are.
Yeah.
And they're, if there's hubris, it's asking God to help me kill other Christians for for a human project like that. Yeah.
It's interesting, and I've done just a little bit. I'm just fascinated with religion, and it's amazing when you compare a lot of the religions, Christianity and
Mm-hmm.
Judaism and uh, Islam. They have a lot in common, and I don't think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people know that, and I don't think a lot of people want to acknowledge that. And this brings me to my other question is, and through the years, uh, you know, words, meaning to words change. And one of the words that I'm trying to find what the real definition is in today's world is, what is a Christian? How do you define a
Mm.
Christian? So how would you answer that question? How do you define a Christian in today's world?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so
I think
there's
a
this
Christian
story. It's probably
is someone who follows the teachings of Christ. Go ahead.
uh, yeah, I mean, that's obviously the implied um well, I think honestly it has become these days more about following uh, teachings about Christ rather than the teachings of Christ. Because uh, the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5, 6, and 7, the Sermon on the Plain in Luke, I think, chapter 3, these are all very clear ethical teachings of Christ. Turn the other cheek, bless those who persecute you. Um, uh, the ethical teachings of Christ. Those don't get a lot of play. No one ever says we should put the Beatitudes on the wall of the school. Instead, they
It
want
drives me crazy. Go ahead.
right. And so uh, there's this story. It's probably apocryphal. I mean, it's almost certainly apocryphal, but it's told often in Quaker and Mennonite circles. And the idea is there's a Mennonite farmer and he's out working in the fields, and an evangelical missionary is driving around, and he sees the Mennonite farmer, and he stops and he waves the man down, and he asks the farmer, he says, I'm a missionary and I'm out here to tell people about Jesus. Tell me, are you a Christian? And the farmer thinks for a second and scratches his chin. And then he says, I don't know, but here's the names of 3 people I know. You should ask them. And so it's this idea that Christian is kind of a title. I'm skeptical of people who label themselves that way. I think it's a title other people give you. Um, it's kind of like if you spend a lot of time telling me as a fellow white person how anti-racist you are, or how much of a feminist you are, that hits one way. But if a black person tells me how anti-racist you are, or a woman tells me how feminist you are, those hit in a different way. So I think it's my honest answer is I think it's probably best if other people give us that title rather than if we claim it.
That's an excellent point, because so much that I read about and what I see. Yes, I am a follower of Christ, and I am a believer in the teachings of Christ. Uh, but I also recognize other religions, and I am surely not a white Christian nationalist. Um, but it's I think it's, and you brought up a good point about the Beatitudes. We always talk about the Ten Commandments, the Ten Commandments, the Ten Commandments. But yes, nobody wants to talk about the Beatitudes. Nobody wants to talk about blessed are the meek. Because
Right.
in the Jesus and John Wayne book, which I thought I had it and
Uh-huh.
I was going to show it, but it's all about masculinity, and it's all about
Right.
the the secretary of the Department of War instead of defense. He's
So called.
um, well, good. This is interesting, and as I said, this is our first segment on that. Um, I want to kind of close it up with a quote from Catherine Stewart from her book, The Power Worshippers. And this goes back to exactly what you were talking about, access to power. In her book,
Yeah.
The Power Worshippers Inside the Dangerous Rise of Religious Nationalism, she writes, the rise of the religious right should be a cause for alarm among all who care about the future of democracy in America. If Christians, let me start all over, if Christian nationalism is a pathology rooted in America's past, as I have argued, so too may the cure draw in important ways from our history, overcoming this kind of reactionary and authoritarian movement isn't just isn't just Americans can do. It is what has made America who we are. And once again, that's a quote from Catherine Stewart. So this has been interesting, and I'd love to talk to you again. Tell our subscribers how they can find you, and I also understand that you have a blog, and tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I work on a number of different projects. I have a newsletter that goes out weekly. I try to think of it as a good newsletter where I search for things that are beautiful and share them with other people, because often our world around us right now doesn't feel beautiful. Uh, I do have a blog that I've been publishing since 2003, but it's fallen off a little bit in recent years. And I recently published a book. Uh, I am, as we said in the introduction, I'm a sixth generation Mississippian, and we love to eat. And so I wrote a book called Food is Love that's all about the foods that people who loved me made for me as proof of their love, and that we continue to eat to this day as a way to remember the people who loved us. And you can find all of this and more at my website, hughhollowell.org, hughhollowell.org. I'm sure we can put that in show notes or whatever. And yeah, just I'm grateful for the time we got to spend together, and I could talk about this all day to your.
Well, good, and I'd love to have
So
you back.
happy to come back. Happy to come back anytime it's helpful.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. A couple of things I do want to talk to our subscribers. Thank you. And to those who have made donations to our podcast, thank you. And to all of you, I and Jim, who's not with us right now, we want to hear from you. We want to know what you thought about this podcast. We want the good, what we did right, the bad, what we didn't do good, and the ugly. We want to know what you want us to talk about. We want to hear the subjects that is important to you. In our previous broadcast, we talked about the community garden in Horn Lake with Yolanda Hassel Rooks and what she's doing uh, as a solution to food insecurity in Horn Lake, Mississippi. We do want to hear from you. You can contact me at shappenings1, that's mshappenings, the number one, at gmail.com. You can find us on YouTube, MS Happenings. You can find us on Spotify, Apple, and the other, the other outlets on social media. So we do want to hear from you. We want to know what you want us to talk about. We want to know, and we need to know what you want to do, what you want to talk about. So, as always, I sign off. Once again, Hugh, thank you so much for being with us. And
Thank you.
remember, may we never become indifferent to the suffering of others. Thanks so much. Have a great week.